That leads me to my next question. How do you know that Islam is inherently violent? So if you're going just by scripture, isn't that true for Christians as well? The Bible, like come with a sword, etc.?
Right. Okay, so the difference is this. You have the scriptures, but it's not just the scriptures. So you have the calls to violence in the Quran. Then you have what's the hadith, the teachings of Muhammad. Okay, and Muhammad's considered the perfect example. Every Muslim's supposed to follow him. Okay, and the hadith, or the sunnah, which is the example of the Prophet as derived from the hadith, is essentially, with the Quran, the twin pillars of Islamic epistemology, if you will. And that is full of violence and intolerance. Okay, so both the Quran and the hadith. More so, the Islamic jurists who are looked upon, the ulama as they're called, have distilled Islamic law based on these two texts. And they conclude that things like jihad is absolutely obligatory, which is I have to go fight and conquer and spread Islam and subjugate the infidel, et cetera. That I have to place the dhimmi or, second-class status. Okay, the whole 9 yards. Okay, so that's Islam. So it's in the text, it's in their law. Okay, and, look around Muslim countries, I see it still happening. So there's a reason that when you look at the 50 worst nations where Christians are being persecuted, 37 are Muslim. Okay, so we got that. Now, Christianity, okay, so the Old Testament certainly is full of violence. The New Testament, you're right. I myself am an advocate. I wrote a book called The Two Swords of Christ, where I reference Jesus in Luke, where he tells his disciples, whoever doesn't have a sword, go sell your garment and buy a sword. And they say, look, Lord, here are two swords, and here, that's enough. Now, to modern-day Christians, of course, they allegorize this into meaninglessness. Exactly. It means nothing, okay? To pre-modern, especially medieval Christians, it meant that two swords. One is a spiritual sword against spiritual enemies, which modern-day Christians, I think, still acknowledge. But the second sword is a secular sword against material enemies, okay? And that's what they don't acknowledge. Okay, so I myself do believe that the New Testament certainly makes room for just war. Now, the pivotal difference is this. So I mentioned the texts, and then I mentioned the actual teachings and codification. I don't know of any Christian theologian who says we have to do holy war until the world is converted to Christianity, okay? Because the texts don't support that. They do support self-defense, defending the innocent, the widow, the orphan, and et cetera, okay? But they don't. And there's one more other aspect to this, which actually the Old Testament, if you look at the Old Testament, the violence that God, Jehovah, Yahweh calls on the Hebrews to engage in, it's always directed against finite temporal people who have a name and an identity. They fight kill the Jebusites and the Hebusites and et cetera, et cetera.
Interesting,
Those people no longer exist. So even if I'm reading that, these are not even real people. It's localized to a finite group and time. The Quran doesn't do that. It's a very open-ended language. It says, in the present, fight the non-Muslim. Even though at the time, the non-Muslim could have been a Persian, Zoroastrian, a Byzantine. So it's taken on a transcendent, eternal logic. It's not just, the Hebrews were fighting the people in that region, and, that's the end of it. So I think that's a big difference in my opinion.